It's now my pleasure to introduce Alicia Edsen, who is a Senior Vice President of Kiewit, with executive oversight of corporate safety, environmental, and human resources. She's a division manager of Kiewit Building Group and also a member of Kiewit's Executive Management Committee. Alicia works with more than 25,000 staff and craft employees overseeing the company's safety, environmental compliance, and human resource operations. So please join me in welcoming Alicia Edsen.
Perfect. Well, thank you. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here and applaud everything you all are doing to prepare the future workforce to think about safety, to understand, what the repercussions of not building work safe can mean. And, I've been with Kiewit about 22 years. And in 2000 was asked to take over the leadership for safety. So some of you have shared kind of what some of those turning points were. I would tell you, for me, in this role, it was June of 2022 when we experienced back-to-back fatalities. And, when you find yourself giving a hug to the mom and the older brother of a young kid that you no longer have, it certainly puts a big impression on you, and you realize how precious our industry is. Shortly after that, about 4 months later, Tom mentioned we had a subcontractor fatality, and it was a gentleman that was transitioning, working at heights, and found himself not tied off and fell 70 feet into the water. It was a couple weeks after that. I was in Montreal, and I remember I was in a rental car, and I went to change lanes, and I was kind of getting off of the highway, and the car started to pull me back into the lane. And I sat there and I thought, here we have technology where a vehicle is pulling me back into the lane. It knows, the lane I'm in, it's pulling me back in the lane, yet we still have people falling from heights. We're essentially using the same lanyards that were developed in 1970, albeit, Kiewit, we've switched to leading edge, sharp edge across the board just to take that decision making off of the table, but essentially using some of the same technology, if you will. And we've got big equipment backing over people, running over people, hitting people. We've got human equipment interaction, and I would tell you, that 4-month span where we started to do a huge fatality analysis and looked at the 157 fatalities Kiewit had over the last 60 years and said, hey, we really need to figure out what we can do to eliminate fatalities and serious injuries. And that's kind of where I really started a passion for technology, because I'm like, we can only get so much better with our programs. We can train, we can teach, we can do all this stuff, but there's got to be something that we can do with technology to get us to the next level. What I quickly realized is it wasn't going to be a Kiewit solution. In order to take this journey, it was going to take us to press our vendors, press our manufacturers, partner with our clients to demand higher standards, so that when we realized that there were better solutions out there, that we were helping the industry as a whole. It wasn't just a Kiewit thing again. So, you can see here, these are our life-saving action categories, and really the areas that, as we're looking at safety solutions and our safety programs, it's built around these categories that we know can, if not done correctly, if work's not done correctly in these areas, it can certainly lead to fatalities, if not multiple fatalities. So these are the categories that we've really been trying to attack and figure out, what are things we can do with technology to help us in these areas. So what I wanted to do today, I'm just going to go through some of the areas that we've kind of pushed our vendors, manufacturers, and even review, in this case, technology that very much exists. Everybody has. So this is drones. Last year, we started to realize, we're not really utilizing the capability of drones that we could when it comes to safety. And so some of our MOT operations, we've started to use drones to take a look at our operations. We come back in the next day, and this is an example of where we found that the asphalt paving crew, there were guys walking under the placer and turning their backs to live traffic. And so we were able to pull that up, show the crew, talk to them about the risks, show them videos. We've done fatality reenactment videos of actual fatalities that Kiewit's experienced, where we've had managers talk about it and some of the individuals that were around. So again, just trying to help people understand, here's real time how we're not acting, or how we can improve. And not only has it helped safety, certainly a lot of these drone studies are pointing out areas of quality and just operational efficiencies in general. But this is just an example of, like I said, a very easily, readily available technology where we can use. Overhead power lines is something that, we find ourselves, we've got a piece of equipment, and next thing you know, somehow it's ended up in an overhead power line. Thankfully, we haven't had anything catastrophic recently, but we've had a lot of near misses. And it was something that we just sat there and we're like, what can we do? What can we do? Well, I was walking out to my garage one day and I looked at the beam across the garage. And you cross that beam, if the garage door is going down, it goes back up. I thought, now why can't there be some kind of a beam that if a piece of equipment passes that, there's some kind of loud audible or something, or lights or something that would happen that would give not only the people on the ground but the operator some kind of indication that they're getting too close to a power line. So we actually worked with Highway Resource Solutions. They're out of the UK, and they have now developed, and we've got it on some of our sites, basically just these little stanchions that are easily moved. You can move as you're going, as you're changing like stations or things like that. And it does exactly that. It's got a beam, and the audible is so loud that they can hear it in the cab when the equipment's running and things like that. So again, I think the question was asked earlier, like, what would industry want the students to know and do? And I think a lot of it's just be curious about this technology and the capabilities of things that are out there and things we can do. And so that's just an example of what we've done there. Partnering with Caterpillar. So Caterpillar, we're a huge client of Caterpillar's, and we do a lot of work with them, and they've been a fantastic partner from a safety perspective. One of the things that we developed, I think it was about 4 years ago, was we said, hey, why is it that I have to climb up into the cab to understand if somebody's wearing their seatbelt or not? As we did our fatality analysis, I talked about one of the things we found related to equipment is that it wasn't that people that were killed by equipment, it wasn't that they were on the ground and being run over. They were actually, we found out they were ejected from the piece of equipment because they didn't have their seatbelt on. Again, such a basic thing that today you think everybody wears their seatbelt. Well, they actually don't, because sometimes it's uncomfortable and they're in there all day. So we said, I don't want to stop every piece of equipment and climb up there and make sure somebody has their seatbelt on. So they created these purple lights that now, if the light is on, then we know that the seatbelt's not engaged. And so, there's ways around it, and we did find some people figured out how to do it behind their back and everything else. But nonetheless, good opportunity to work with Caterpillar and be able to do that. They're also coming out with fantastic technology around AI and the capability to understand if it's a person versus an object. A lot of the sensors and things that we have piloted in the past with different pieces of equipment have been annoying to the operators because it's constantly beeping, especially if you get into like a solar farm or some of those applications where you're constantly around something. But they've made a ton of progress with their Detect smart camera. And it actually identifies people versus objects. The other thing that we worked with them on is we said, hey, it's great that the cab driver understands that they are getting close to something because it starts to beep and it beeps quicker and faster, but what about the people on the ground? So last fall, they also implemented an external audible. So as it's going off in the cab, it's also going off on the ground, and notifying those people who might not be paying attention, looking at their phone, distracted, whatever's going on. So the other thing, and this really probably isn't necessarily fatality category, but this was a huge low-hanging fruit in my mind, was grinders were like the bane of my existence the first year. I'm like, if I read one more grinder incident that happened, I'm gonna lose it. But we've worked with DeWalt to identify and look at all of our injuries and figure out, how can we continue to push them to build either it's auto stops or different types of functionality. In this case, it's dust control and vibration that can help us with, again, like I said, it's just that low-hanging fruit. It's those tools that we use every day and that are certainly the cause of a lot of our injuries and things. So a couple things that this certainly is not a commercial for DeWalt. In fact, we've worked with a lot of manufacturers and tried to push them. We have not found anyone else, though, who can meet the two requirements in the tools that they have. And our requirements were that, one, we want to be able to visually identify it, and that's their Perform and Protect badge helps us do that, so we know that they're using the safest tool. So if I'm walking past an operation and I see somebody using a drill, I can easily see, is it in fact the Perform and Protect line, versus having to understand all the different types of drills. And then also the safety features cannot be disabled. A lot of the manufacturers, there are ways, and believe it or not, people figure it out. 5 clicks, stand on your foot, do 2 turns, and whatever it is, somehow they figured it out. They've Googled it, and they know how to disable those safety features. So that's just something that we've worked on with DeWalt. Our Kiewit Offshore's facility, AI is a huge thing right now, so we are dabbling in this as far as the cameras and the understanding of how we can be, it's not necessarily proactive, but understanding more real time when there's potential for risk. It works well because it's a fixed facility. There's there is 70 different cameras, so it takes a lot. You have to train the tools. So anything AI, it has to be trained, and so based on the facility and what you have going on and the different kind of rules or the different kinds of things. But we are working with that, and we actually have been. We were brought that with Chevron, and I would tell you, as we talk about partners, our oil, gas, and chemical clients have been fantastic. In fact, it's some of my favorite jobs because they push us to be better. They demand it, and it helps us to kind of rethink how we can do things and how we can do things better and faster. But here you can see just kind of the results of different types of observations that the AI tool gave us. And there were, when we say risk rating 4+, that's a risk rating 4 for us is a potential fatality, and a 5 is multiple fatalities. So when you talk about 44 different types of things where maybe the handrail wasn't up or it wasn't up correctly, or the different things that they're seeing have been beneficial. So we're going to continue to look at different types of AI technology and certainly how we can use it in more of our linear work and different applications for that. So, and then the other thing that we're in the middle of right now is we're partnering with MSA, and this really gets to that working at heights piece that, it's just with today's technology, it's frustrating to think that somebody could, we're relying on people to remember how to transition and how to tie off and not accidentally be unhooked for that split second. And so what they're working on is they've got quite a few researchers and their R&D facility working on, again, lights, notifications to the supervisors, an alarm that goes off if you're not tied off. So it's actually just out there in Pittsburgh a couple weeks ago, and we were getting an update from them. It's a long process, as you can imagine, but it's I think it's worth it because, if we can have something by the end of 2026 that in my mind could be world changing in this space, we certainly want to be a part of it if we can. So so that's another thing we're doing. The other thing I would say from a technology perspective is just encouraging people to look at data, and understanding the data and analyzing the data and giving yourself data that will make a difference. For us, I told you about our LSA categories. We have safeguards associated with each of those categories, and we have what we call an LSA assessment where you go out, you say, okay, related to human equipment interaction, are these things in place on this crew? And we do that through an assessment. When we looked at the results, basically we found, because we've been collecting this data now consistently since 2020, we've been collecting potential of severity incidents since 2015, but we found that if we do the equivalent of one of those assessments per crew per week, we're 4 times less likely to have an incident and 3 times less likely to have a severe incident. And so, and that's just looking at the potential of what our incidents have been classified as. So, which makes sense, right? I mean, you have people out there focusing on those high-risk areas, correcting them, training. The more you do that, the less you have. So, some of the other keys of this has been making sure that it's various disciplines. It can't always be the same crew. Also throughout the week, a lot of our observation programs of the past, we found that, each foreman did 5 observations, but they did it Friday morning. Every Friday morning, they all checked that box. So, so we've really been focusing on that. And then the other thing that our data analysts found is where we're finding at-risk items, we're 5 times less likely to have an actual severity level 2+, which you can think of as kind of probably a recordable because it's stitches, things like that. And that's because we feel like it's because we're not pencil whipping it. Say, yep, everything's in place. So we're actually finding at-risk items, again, taking the opportunity to train. So I think just in general, there's so many different industries that have figured out how to use data and how to get smarter and how to use technology and how to bring all those things together. And we certainly are on the journey and would love any ideas you guys have or anything you ever come up with that you want to pilot on a project or talk through or any kind of projects that your students do. We'd love to be a part of it. So that is all I have. Oh, I did. Surgeon passed out these. This basically summarizes every quarter. Kiewit does these magazines, and this summarizes a lot of, just in more detail, a lot of the stuff that I covered today. So, right. Thank you.
You have a question?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Alicia here. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, the way you do that is this way. Okay. Go.
Tricky.
Alicia, thank you very much. Your presentation was very inspiring, along with the presentations of all the colleagues here. I'm a professor of civil engineering, and I've been civil and construction engineering, and I've been really blessed to be linked with Kiewit through many Purdue alumni, including Jim Rowings. And I've been blessed to actually see some of these technologies explained to my students primarily through Kiewit's Innovation Center. And what has been really cool is your very last point is safety is not something that should be disintegrated from other performance metrics, and safety, quality, productivity all kind of go together. So thank you for bringing that, because sometimes we think we have to sacrifice one of the metrics for the other. My question is, Kiewit has a large number of interns from our programs from across different universities. I wanted to know what Kiewit's practice has been to introduce our undergrad as well as grad interns to these technologies and to the value they could bring to the construction processes, as they are at the field, but also what value that these students can bring when they come back to the classroom, because many of our courses are experience-based. We like to link what the students are getting in the classroom with what they're getting in the field, and I really like what Professor Kleiner mentioned about practice to research to practice, that spectrum. So how is Kiewit doing that by training even the interns that you are getting on your jobs?
I think it depends on the projects, right? There's so many different kinds of projects, so they're exposed to different pieces of this. We educate through onboarding. We also try to educate through just like I said, the LSA assessments and making sure that they understand the categories and all of that. We also have, we do different types of competitions and, innovation days, and they participate in our Civis programs, which is our weekly meetings where our craft come in and here's some challenges that we see, and so they're able to kind of participate in that. I don't know that there's anything specific other than our projects try to encourage innovation and try to encourage, hey, what can we do differently? And it's amazing to me, the jobs that I visit, that you go out there and you see how many different things that are out there and what people have creatively come up with. I don't know if you can.
I might just add, I think it's a partnership. And I think one of the things that can happen then by the faculty is to ask the students in your classes, what did they learn, and get the reflection of their experience with regard to safety, right? That's what this is all about. So ask that. And we shouldn't be embarrassed. No company should be embarrassed. They ought to be happy if people say, hey, I learned this. And unfortunately, if the company isn't operating exactly right, the students will have that opportunity to reflect that as well. And that helps the ones that are working at becoming better in the industry. And it will in turn penalize those, because Deb Gruby wouldn't have gone to work for them coming out of school if she heard from her classmates that this wasn't a good, safe company. What she heard was everything positive about DuPont, right? And that made a decision. So that's the best way I think we can use our system that we have here. Everybody selects who they want to go to work for to get the best opportunities.
Did you have anything?
I'm on now. So, Alicia, number one, great presentation. I applaud Kiewit and obviously senior management for supporting all of this. I mean, it says that's the culture, right? We're trying to get better. And, the last example you have really is kind of the Moneyball thing, right? Where you're doing data analytics to try to determine where you might have potential safety issues. You still have to deliver, right? You still have to make sure that it's done correctly. We had a presentation in one of the previous symposia of a gentleman who was, I think he's a senior VP with Oracle, and they have developed an AI system, and they're using it with several building contractors on the West Coast and the East Coast. And what it does is it basically goes into data, does data analytics based on data that's already collected, like how your work breakdown structure is progressing, what's your percentage complete, and that shows what activities are ongoing and so on. and they will run a report on the weekend on 40 or 50 different projects. And Sunday afternoon, they send a report in, and it's the top 5. These are the projects that you need to be most concerned about statistically, because of you're working at heights, or you've got a larger workforce and all that kind of stuff. I think this is the wave of the future. You still have to do things safely, but it provides some tools in our toolkit to actually make it happen. And so some of your technologies were forward-looking. Some of your technologies were trying to correct problems in the field. I most like the one that was the overhead power thing, because I ran into that early in my career where somebody hit one and 17 kV line, and all it did was blow the tires out, but it could have killed 2 or 3 people. So, you get to the end of the day and you're very tired and you just forget,
Yep.
and you run into a power line, it can kill you. And so thank you very much.
Yeah, no, that's a great comment about the data you currently collect. We have a safety risk forecast that does something very similar, and in a lot of cases there's nothing you can do about it, but it'll highlight something. For instance, the percent of craft that are less than 3 years of Kiewit experience. It's one of the factors that flags things. I mean, you might not be able to do anything about that, but you can put some better short service employee programs in place and take precautions. So it's great. Yeah. Thank you.
So, okay.